Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm particularly pleased in presenting this year's estimates of revenue and expenditure, the fourth presented by me as the Minister of Finance when this government came into office in July 2021, 6 years ago. Our country was in a dire state, with unemployment growing and an economy in decline. COVID did not help, but our problems as a nation predate the pandemic. This year, 2024-2025, the St. Lucian economy has performed remarkably. Unemployment is below the double digits and the lowest in living memory. The tourism industry has enjoyed its best year. Direct investment is on the rise. Consumer confidence is up, and the country's fiscal position is solid, allowing the government with the fiscal space to provide unprecedented support to vulnerable groups and individuals. Our country is in a much better place than it was during the last administration's tenure. Our government has a record of delivery and a plan for more. Mr. Speaker, I am proud of the progress we have made and the support of my colleagues and the people of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia is on the path to recovery. We are rebuilding our nation and ensuring that rising prosperity starts to be felt in every constituency across the country. While the yearly estimates have been presented on the different themes and areas of focus, a common philosophical underpinning of putting people first has characterized the annual estimates and expenditure for the last 4 years. These estimates have sought to continue the rebuilding of our country. Mr. Speaker, no one is forgotten in the plans to develop St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, in presenting the estimates of expenditure for the fiscal year 2025 to 2026, it is necessary to provide context that allows for comparisons between the outrun and estimates for 2024-25, enabling members to assess the realism of the 2025-26 estimates of revenue and expenditure being presented. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commence my presentation in the spirit of accountability to report the outrun for the 2024-2025 period compared to the approved estimates of revenue and expenditure for the same period. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the budget performance for the year 2024-2025 fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, the government was able to raise annual revenue of 1.91 billion to finance its operational expenses and capital projects. The analysis of annual revenue is as follows: 302.1 million raised in loan funds, 1.48 billion in domestic revenues, 70.5 million in grants, and 93.1 million in bonds. Mr. Speaker, I will say more on these figures later. Mr. Speaker, due to the prudent fiscal management, the government was able to stay within the approved estimates of expenditure of 1.894 billion for the fiscal year 2024-2025. The year-end outlook for 2024-2025 indicates that spending will be 1.8 billion, 5% below the approved estimates. The anticipated reduced expenditure outcome can be attributed to a decrease in capital projects expenditure from 299.3 million to 227 million, resulting from suboptimal project implementation levels and administrative bottlenecks. In the case of operational expenses, a 1.1% decline is anticipated, mainly due to lower payments for goods and services, project operations, and reduced interest payments. However, some of the reduced expenditure in some areas will be partly offset by increased wages and salaries, which are expected to exceed budget levels due to transfers to statutory bodies and payment of salary increases and back pay in February 2025 in excess of 30 million. Mr. Speaker, this government has been projecting a primary surplus at the end of every fiscal year for 3 consecutive years. Based on preliminary information, a primary surplus of 77 million is projected, equivalent to 1.1% of the gross domestic product. Additionally, a current surplus of 141 million is projected for the fiscal year 2024-2025. Mr. Speaker, allow me to quickly define surpluses so that members can appreciate the relevance of these figures. A current surplus is the difference between a government's revenue and current expenditures. It indicates that the government generates more revenue from its regular operations, such as taxes, fees, and other sources, than it spends on recurring or day-to-day functions, including wages, services, and operational costs. A recurrent surplus indicates that the government's ongoing revenues are sufficient to cover its regular expenditures over time. A primary surplus, on the other hand, refers to the difference between a government's total revenue and its total expenditures, excluding interest payments on public debt. It is an important indicator of fiscal policy management because it shows where the government can balance its budget before considering debt servicing. The primary surplus is a critical indicator for assessing the fiscal sustainability as it reflects the government's ability to reduce its debt over time. An overall surplus occurs when the government's total revenue exceeds its total expenditure, including interest payments on public debt. It represents a situation where the government is not only covering its current spending and capital investments, but also reducing its total debt. Mr. Speaker, the government's prudent debt management strategy will yield better than expected results compared to the initial projections in the 2024-2025 estimates, with the overall deficit narrowing to 147.9 million from the previously projected 214 million, or $66 million less than was projected. Mr. Speaker, creditworthiness is a crucial component of our thriving economic system. Therefore, the government, as a major economic player, must lead by example by honoring its financial obligations in a responsible and timely way. As such, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform you that the government of St. Lucia has never defaulted on its debt obligations. Mr. Speaker, it was brought to my attention earlier this year that the government owed over $80 million in land acquisition costs that had been outstanding for decades and in some cases generations. In the health sector, a total of $75 million was owed to suppliers for COVID and pre-COVID-19 pandemic government purchases. To liquidate its financial obligations, my government has decided to settle $40 million for land acquisition and $25 million for health sector supplies, totaling $65 million in expenditure. Mr. Speaker, it will please members to know that in contrast to the immediate past, government's indebtedness to local suppliers is within the manageable levels, and our national insurance matching contributions and lease payments are being honored. My government intends to settle these debts as soon as possible. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding those unplanned payments, government provided $8 million to WASCO to settle some of its pressing financial obligations and an additional $10 million to support the Millennium Heights Medical Complex to meet its obligations. Mr. Speaker, in this financial year, the government has spent approximately $577.3 million on wages and salaries, representing a 6.6% increase over the amount approved for 2024-2025, and a 10.8% increase over the actual amount spent in the previous year, 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, it is clear from the figures just presented that my government has been doing much to assist workers in combating the rising price of goods, a phenomenon largely driven by imported inflation caused by geopolitical factors and global supply chain issues. In these circumstances, vulnerable groups suffer disproportionately, necessitating my government's strategic interventions to mitigate the negative impact of these external shocks. Mr. Speaker, allow me to list some of my government interventions. $500 in bonus payments to all civil servants in December 2024, amounting to $7 million. Back pay to all public servants, amounting to $33.4 million, coming from China negotiations from 2022 to 2024 of 6%. A salary increase for all public servants in February 2025. A $500 in bonus paid to all pensioners in December 2024. Increase in minimum pensions to NIC pensioners to $500 per month. Increase in minimum pensions to public service pensioners. A lump sum payment to all pensioners of $500, amounting to $1.4 million in February 2025. Another one-time payment of $600 to all pensioners in November 24, resulted in a total payment of $1.8 million to all government pensioners. A one-off payment of $1,400 to be made to all teachers for material allowances. Enactment of a minimum wage. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia continues to honor its debt obligations comfortably. For this fiscal year, total debt service payments are anticipated to amount to $311.4 million, representing a 4.2% decline over the amounts paid in 2023-2024. This outcome is mainly due to reduced principal repayments as the government manages its debt strategy more effectively. Principal repayments are expected to fall to $86.6 million, which is 6.8% less than the budgeted amount, while interest payments are anticipated to decrease to $224.8 million, representing a 3% reduction, as the debt unit has been actively engaged in seeking better terms for our loans. Transfers. Mr. Speaker, for the fiscal year 2024-2025, transfer payments were $281.2 million, an 8.1% increase over the approved estimates of $260.2 million, and a 6.7% above the payments made in 2023-2024. These payments included the following: $10.4 million public assistance, $2.8 million in social grants, over $65 million for outstanding land acquisition and health expenses for medicines and other health treatments, over $8 million to facilitate back pay for employees of eligible statutory boards. Mr. Speaker, based on preliminary figures, expenditure on goods and services is projected at $266.6 million, a decline of 13.1% or $55.2 million, below the approved estimates for 2024-2025. Mr. Speaker, the overall decline is due mainly to rental payments and lease agreements that did not materialize as planned. Other areas that are expected to reflect declines. Other areas that are expected to reflect declines are traveling, operating expenses, maintenance, and consultancies. Mr. Speaker, my government, in response to urgent requests, found the fiscal space to provide much-needed support in the following areas: provided summer employment for over 260 students, training of 79 new police recruits, and $20 million to facilitate tax refunds. Development capital expenditure. Mr. Speaker, in the 2024-2025 fiscal year, the government approved $299.3 million in capital expenditure. with 19.2 million allocated to non-project capital and 280.1 million allocated to capital projects. Preliminary information indicates that the year-end outlook for capital implementation is approximately 227 million, representing a 24.2% decline from the approved amounts. Mr. Speaker, I referred earlier to delays in capital projects, which resulted in a lower than expected capital expenditure costs. Despite the challenges, several key capital projects were undertaken, and based on preliminary data, a satisfactory outcome is expected at the end of this financial year. The Department of Infrastructure total expenditure of 53.8 million, including the Millennium Highway West Coast Road, 34.1 million, road improvement projects, 7.6 million, renewable energy sector development project, 1.2 million, Department of Economic Development, 83.6 million, St. Jude Hospital, 40.5 million, street lighting replacement project, 7 million, constituency development program, 17.2 million. The Department of Education, 22.3 million. Major repairs to schools, 6.9 million. St. Lucia Human Capital Resilience Projects, 5 million. Ministry of Housing and Local Government, 10.4 million. Continuation of PROUD, 3 million. Cemetery Expansion Project, 3.7 million. Rehabilitation of Human Resource Centers, 1.4 million. And National Sites and Services, 1.2 million. Department of Fiscal Development, 46.4 million. Land administration and payment of outstanding debt for land acquisition, 44 million. Reconstruction of Library, Market and Square, 1.5 million. Ministry of Agriculture, repairs to the Choiseul Fishing Port, 7.2 million. Ministry of Tourism, 8 million. OECS Tourism Project, 7.1 million. Mr. Speaker, I now move to account of the revenue performance for the fiscal year 2024-2025. Mr. Speaker, total recurrent revenue comprising tax revenue and non-tax revenue is projected to increase by 1.2% by year-end over the approved estimates of 1.48 billion. This outcome also represents an increase of 8.5% over the actuals recorded in 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, this revenue performance reflects the policies pursued by this government and expansion in economic activity buoyed by increased investor confidence and higher consumer spending. Mr. Speaker, tax revenue inflows are expected to be 1.36 billion, a 2.6% increase above the amount approved for the fiscal year. The main economic classes of revenue responsible for this increase are property taxes, taxes on goods and services, and taxes on international trade and transactions. The collection of commercial property taxes increased by 11.4% over the amount received in 2023, arising mainly from taxpayers taking advantage of the ongoing amnesty program. The increases in tax revenue on goods and services stem from higher than anticipated inflows from VAT, 7%, and the health and security levy, 5.9%, over the approved estimates for 2024-2025. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, the decline in non-tax revenue is due to lower than expected voluntary transfers to the central government. Additionally, grant receipts typically tied to project implementation are estimated at 70.5 million, representing a 37.5% decline from the amount approved for 2024-2025. This outcome is due to delays in grant receipts and unexpected challenges that have affected progress in projects heavily funded by grant funds. Financing. As previously discussed, the government anticipates an enhancement in its fiscal operations, leading to a narrowing of the fiscal deficit from the approved estimates of 215 million or 2.9% of GDP to an estimated 147.9 million or 2% of GDP. Additionally, the primary surplus is forecasted to be 77 million or 59 million more than the approved estimates over by less by 17 million. Mr. Speaker, other funding for the budget is made up of as follows. Loans, 207.6 million, reflecting a strategic use of borrowing to meet critical funding requirements for developmental projects and infrastructure enhancement. These loan disbursements are for ongoing and current projects. Some of these projects include loans from the Caribbean Development Bank, 155.2 million, the Miami Highway and West Coast Reconstruction, 11 million, policy-based loans for land administration and the Inland Revenue Department system, 115.3 million. Building capacity for public health system resilience, 9.7 million. Enhancing the resilience of the fire service, 6.2 million, and the MSME loan grant facility of 5.9 million. Loans from the International Development Association and the World Bank Group of 151.5 million, comprising of the St. Lucia Sustainable Development Credit, 108.8 million. Unleashing the Blue Economy of the Caribbean, 20.5 million. Health Strengthening Project, 14.7 million. Human Capital Resilience Project, 6.9 million. Loans from the Caribbean Development Fund, 800,000. Country Assistance Program of 800,000, and the Passions Water Project. 111.7 million to meet short to medium term financing needs in the diversification of the government's debt portfolio. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the 2025-2026 budget proposal. Mr. Speaker, having accounted for my government's stewardship for the fiscal year 2024-2025, I come now to the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2025-2026. These estimates of $2,557,519,900, the highest in our history, are expected to build on last year's plans. In some cases, there will be a continuation of ongoing initiatives, and in others, an inclusion of complementary initiatives. Mr. Speaker, in planning for the future, we have taken the necessary risk mitigation measures in a globally uncertain environment to give us the best chance of realizing our strategic objectives. That is why, Mr. Speaker, last week, the House of Assembly passed the historic Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill. Mr. Speaker, the current level of global instability caused by the continuous Russian-Ukraine conflict, the war in Gaza, the imposition of trade tariffs between major trading partners, proposed increases in international shipping costs, and climate events may expose the solution economy to increased downside risk. In the event these increased downside risks were to materialize in a significant way, adjustments to the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2025-2026 will become necessary. It is my hope that good sense will prevail among major world leaders to allow for a more globally stable economic environment. In any event, Mr. Speaker, my government will always continue to put in the people first. Mr. Speaker, this year's estimates will build on last year's budget theme, the year of infrastructure, but will be complemented by a special focus on health and social development, citizen safety, and job creation. Mr. Speaker, this year's initiatives will include the following: infrastructural expansion program to include roads, schools, and government buildings, housing development, expansion of health services around the island, and the long-awaited commissioning of the St. Jude Hospital. Measures to enhance citizen security, social, educational, and economic reform programs, rehabilitation of sporting facilities, expansion in emerging areas such as energy, the blue economy, and the digital economy, expanding resilience in the fire service by providing additional tools and equipment, building resilience for climate adaptation, efforts to enhance food security, initiatives to expand investment in all sectors, including foreign investment, youth, and medium-sized and micro and medium-sized entrepreneurship activities. Mr. Speaker, 2025-2026 estimates are expected to allow for further growth in the economy. We have laid the foundation and we are now building on it and providing the impetus for economic growth for the people, as we add health and social development as priority areas in these estimates. The government intends to provide more resources in these areas. For young entrepreneurs and others seeking to expand their businesses, support will continue to be available through the Youth Economy Agency and the MSME Grant Loan Facility. Mr. Speaker, I have placed before this House a realistic and achievable fiscal agenda. To support this agenda, I propose the following for the 2025-2026 budget. Total expenditure proposed for 2025, 2.058 billion, 8.6% above the approved 2024-2025 estimates and 14% above the outlook for 2024-2025. Expenditure. Expenditure will comprise as follows. Recurrent expenditure, 1.6 billion. Capital expenditure, 325.6 million. Interest payments, 236.7 million. Principal payments or amortization, 133.4 million. Mr. Speaker, we project that revenue will total 1.71 billion. Revenue comprises of tax revenue, 1.45 billion. Non-tax revenue, 171.9 million. Capital revenue, 6.7 million. And grants, 93.3 million. Mr. Speaker, government continues to manage the fiscal affairs of this country in a very prudent manner, while at the same time addressing the needs of its citizens. Expansion of the economy will come through government spending, private sector investments, particularly in the area of construction and tourism, and an increase in consumer spending. This year's estimates are expected to generate another primary surplus of 44.7 million, representing 0.5% of GDP. Total expenditure, excluding refunds and principal payments, is estimated at 1.9 million, while total revenue and grants are projected at 1.7 billion. When taken together, the result in the projected overall deficit of 201 million, equivalent to 2.7% of GDP. Recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, for the 2025-2026 fiscal year, the government is proposing to spend 1.6 billion in recurrent expenditure, representing a 6.4% or 96.6 million over the amount approved in 2024-2025. The total recurrent expenditure includes payments for goods and services, interest charges on debt, operating expenses related to project planned activities, and higher rental payments for government offices and other costs of government operations and provision of services. Mr. Speaker, the component of wages and salaries for both government operations and project operations represent 28% of total expenditure, representing a significant share of the annual estimates. The increase in this category can be explained by the recently concluded union negotiations in which all civil servants were given a 6% increase for the triennium 2022-2025 and 7% for the period 2025 to 2028. The effect of the increase for the last triennium and for the upcoming triennium led to central government salaries reaching 573 million, an increase of 5.8% over the approved figure for 2024-2025. This outcome, however, is slightly below the year-end outlook for 2024-2025. This is due to the fact that government could afford and paid the back pay payments to civil servants in the 2024-2025 year. Mr. Speaker, debt service. The government will continue to timely honor its debt obligations, even as the grace period for many of the loans taken for COVID-19 pandemic has come to an end and the repayment due. Added to this, the associated interest payment based on an unfavorable variable rates, or the SOFR, will increase for the fiscal year 2025 to 2026. For the upcoming fiscal year, 370.1 million is allocated for debt servicing, representing an increase of 58.7 million or 18.9% when compared to the year-end outlook for 2024-2025. Out of this amount, approximately 236.7 million is allocated to interest payments and 133.4 million to principal repayments. Mr. Speaker, permit me to highlight some of the loans that will become due for payment in the upcoming financial year. Repayment of COVID-19 based loans, 22.7 million. Loans from various sources for St. Jude's reconstruction, 13.7 million. Other CDB loans, 40.8 million. Other ROCT loans, 5.6 million. Other IDA loans, 10.9 million. And bonds and treasury bills of 39.7 million. Transfers. Mr. Speaker, even as the economy expands, the government has not lost sight of the need to address the growing needs of vulnerable groups and disadvantaged persons in our society. In this fiscal year, additional support will be provided to marginalized, differently able, and other disadvantaged persons. We have allocated 3.2 million to various organizations and groupings that cater for these citizens. Additionally, the St. Lucia Association of Retired Persons will receive a subvention for the first time this year. Mr. Speaker, in addition to these organizations, the government has provided an increase in public assistance to supplement the resources of the Ministry of Equity, which is actively engaged in supporting the needy in our society. For the upcoming fiscal year, a total of 15.2 million has been allocated for public assistance. Mr. Speaker, part of the government's transfer payments includes payments to statutory boards and regional international agencies. Approximately 200 million has been allocated to statutory boards in the form of grants and contributions to facilitate the provision of much needed public services. Some of these services include healthcare, garbage disposal, and financial services. Other areas attributed to the increase in grants and contributions include, in the main, St. Lucia's increased contributions to the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, Caribbean Community CARICOM, and the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, ECSC. As a result, Mr. Speaker, transfer payments will increase by 6.5% over approved estimates of 2024-2025 to 277 million. Goods and services. Mr. Speaker, the category goods and services is again the second largest expenditure of 466.2 million, representing about 17% of planned expenditure. Of this amount, 349.4 million is for central government operations and 116.8 million for project operations. This outlay represents a 10.5% over the approved estimate of 2024-2025 and 27.2% over the year-end outlook. Mr. Speaker, in the provision of these services, you will note that there is an allowance made for the newly established fire substation at Ancillary, where infrastructural works have begun. Mr. Speaker, in 2025-2026, government expenditure on goods and services include rental and leasing of government offices, including overseas embassies, 83.1 million. Operations and maintenance of government services, 68.1 million. Supplies for government offices, including stationery and other supplies, 52.3 million. And insurance of 22.1 million. The development of capital expenditure budget. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated earlier in my presentation, some infrastructural projects from last year were delayed and will continue into this fiscal year 2025-2026. Last year, the rainy weather contributed to delays in road construction and rehabilitation. Mr. Speaker, it is a fact that the slow rate of implementation has been a cause of concern, and efforts to improve implementation will be a priority this year. Mr. Speaker, based on the budget estimates, the total capital expenditure will be the net capital expenditure will be $325,590,089. Mr. Speaker, this projected $325.6 million represents an 8.8% increase over the amount approved for 2024-2025. Of the total allocation of $325.6 million for capital expenditure, $122.8 million, or 27%, is proposed for the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Transport, representing the largest share of the developmental budget. The amount will be utilized as follows. Department of Infrastructure, Design, Finance, Construct payments, $52.4 million. Millennium Highway West Coast Road Development Project, $25.5 million. Road Maintenance and Road Improvement and Maintenance Program, $8 million. Shock Bridge Construction, $8.2 million. Renewable Energy Sector Projects, $4 million. Other infrastructure developments, including repairs to government buildings and the silting of rivers, $24.7 million. Total, $122.8 million. Mr. Speaker, a potholing truck has been ordered and expected to arrive in St. Lucia later this year to expedite the pace of road rehabilitation island-wide. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Economic Development has been allocated $57.5 million, or 14% of the capital budget. The amount will be utilized as follows. St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project, $29.1 million. Constituency Development Program, $14.7 million. Other expenditure, $13.7 million. The Ministry of Education, a sum of $16.6 million of the development budget is being proposed for the upcoming fiscal year. The main infrastructural projects to be implemented for the agency are the continuation of major repairs and the rehabilitation of school plants. Ministry of Health, a sum of $18 million of the development budget to the Department of Health to support the Health System Strengthening Project, $4.1 million. The OECS Regional Health Project, $4.1 million. Post-COVID-19 Response and Universal Healthcare Coverage Program, $4.2 million. And other health expenses, $5.6 million. The Department of Finance. The Department of Finance has been allocated $163 million to be used as follows. Unleashing the Blue Economy Project, $6.7 million. Upgrade of Government Financial Management System, $4.8 million. Rehabilitation of the Finance Building for mold infestation, $2.6 million. Customs Warehouse Facility, $1.5 million. Repayment of principal and loans, $133.4 million. Other expenditure, $10.5 million. The Department of Fiscal Development, Mr. Speaker, a total of $11.1 million is provided for payment for land acquired by government that still remains unpaid. Mr. Speaker, ministers will elaborate on these and other expenses under their respective portfolios. 2025-26 revenue. Mr. Speaker, having laid out the planned expenditure for the fiscal year 2025-26, allow me to inform on how we plan to finance these expenses. The proposed increase in revenue in this year's estimates will be due to policy initiatives to improve efficiency in revenue collection and an anticipated continued increase in economic activity. The projected total revenue and grants is 1.71 billion, an increase of 8.7%, 136.4 million over the approved estimates for 2024, 2025, and 12.8 million over the amount collected for the same period. The breakdown of revenue and grants as follows. Recurrent revenue, 1.62 billion. Capital revenue, 6.7 million. Grant receipts, 93.9 million. Recurrent revenue. Mr. Speaker, recurrent revenue inflows are projected to increase by 146.7 million over the approved estimates for 2024-25, reaching $1.62 billion for the fiscal year 2025-2026, compared to the outturn for the preceding year. Recurrent revenue is expected to increase by 129.6 million or 8.7%. This increase is expected to be fueled by growth in tourism and planned construction projects in the public and private sector. The total projected recurrent revenue consists of tax revenue, 1.45 billion, and 171.9 million in non-tax revenue. Tax revenue is forecasted to increase by 6.4% over the outturn for 2024-2025, while non-tax revenue is expected to increase by 32.2% over the outturn for the same period. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, the increase in tax revenue will come from increased economic activity and increased levels of tax compliance arising from a streamlining of the tax system. In the case of anticipated revenue, in non-tax revenue, direct transfers from the CIP inflows are expected to increase. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to the details of the major revenue lines under the tax revenue category. Tax revenue, tax on income and profits. Taxes on income and profits are projected to be 258.5 million, 24.9 million above the outturn for 2024-2025. This category is forecasted to perform well due mainly to expansion of the economy. The projection for the main items under this category as follows. Income tax for corporations. The income tax revenue from corporations is expected to generate 132.7 million for the financial year 2025-2026, representing a 5.6% increase above the year-end output for 24-25. Income tax from individuals. The revenue from personal income tax is estimated at 163.4 million. This represents an 8.2% increase over 2024-2025 outturn. Income tax arrears. Income tax arrears are projected at 55.5 million, an increase of 7.7 million or 16.1% from the outturn in 2024-2025. The projected increase is expected to be driven by more concerted efforts from the Inland Revenue Department to collect taxes from both individuals and corporations, together with other policy initiatives which I shall announce during my presentation of the appropriation bill for 2025-2026. Taxes on international trade transactions. Mr. Speaker, taxes on international trade, including customs duties, are projected to increase by 7.5% to reach 227.4 million in 2025-2026, up from the revised estimates of 204.5 million in 2024-2025. Of the total amount to be collected, 169.2 million is expected to come from import duty, 136.7 million from excise tax, 2.5 million from throughput charges, and 5 million from passenger facility fees. The improvement in inflows from this revenue category is driven by general increases in the CI value for imported products and increased economic activity. Taxes on domestic goods and services. Taxes on domestic goods and services are expected to generate 752.8 million, which is 5% above the outturn for 2024-2025. This category includes value-added tax on domestic activity collected by the Inland Revenue Department and excise tax, receipts from VAT collected by the Inland Revenue department account for 51% of revenue from this category and are projected at 226.1 million, which represents 5.8% increase compared to the 2024-2025 outturn. VAT from international trade transactions elected by the Customs and Excise Department is projected to yield 219 million in 2025-26, which is 3.4% above the outturn of 211.9 million in 2024-25. This is expected as the economy grows in key sectors such as construction, tourism, and the wholesale and retail trade. Health and Security Levy. Mr. Speaker, Health and Security Levy is projected to increase by 3.3 million above the 2024-2025 outturn to reach 40.8 million in 2025-2026. Mr. Speaker, while this tax contributes to the overall budget allocation for health and security, its impact needs to be put in proper focus. Allow me again, Mr. Speaker, to detail government's planned expenditures for health and security for the fiscal year 2025-2025 and to remind members of the substantial investment made by government in health and security. Expenditure for health. Recurrent expenditure, 188 million. Capital projects, including St. Jude's reconstruction this year, 38.5 million. Health system strengthening project, 4.1 million. OECS regional health project, 4.1 million. Upgrade of the Millennium Heights complex, 2.5 million. Other projects, including universal health care, 7.3 million. Total capital, 56.5 million. Total health expenditure, 244.5 million. National security, projected expenditure from the Ministry of Justice, recurrent expenditure, 27.9 million. Capital expenditure, 1.6 million. Total expenditure, 29.5 million. Department of Home Affairs includes the correctional services. Recurrent expenditure, 52 million. Capital expenditure, 10.7 million. Total expenditure, 62.7 million. Department of National Security, recurrent expenditure, 92.3 million. Capital expenditure, 4.9 million. Total, 97.2 million. Total expenditure on security, 189.4 million. Mr. Speaker, the total spent by our government for health and security is 433.9 million. And the levy projected intake is 40.8 million, leaving a financing gap of 393.1 million, which has to be funded from other revenue sources. Mr. Speaker, can I read that again? Mr. Speaker, the total spent by our government for health and security is 433.9 million. And the levy projected intake is 40.8 million, leaving a financing gap of 393.1 million, which has to be funded from other revenue sources. Mr. Speaker, l'argent gouvernement qu'a mette pour health et police et bay comme ça. 433.9 million. Et tax là, you can parler about calculer health and security, nous can joindre 40 million tout seul. So gouvernement ni pour joindre 393 million pour nous faire by police, nurse, etc. So let you can parler about health and security, you will and come back again. Mr. Speaker, airport tax. Mr. Speaker, airport tax is projected to record an increase of 6.1% above the 2025 outturn to reach 48.6 million. From all indications, St. Lucia is expected to have another bumper year in tourism in the absence of any disruptive hurricane season or disruptive global economic environment. Service charge on imports is projected to increase by 5.5 million, or 4.6% above the outturn for 2024-25 to reach 123.8 million. The projection is influenced by the higher revenue intake anticipated from increase in economic activity during 2025-2026. Mr. Speaker, revenue collected from taxes on domestic goods and services account for 52% of total recurrent revenue, non-tax revenue. The 2025-2026 projection for non-tax revenues totals 171.9 million, or 32.2% increase over 2024-2025. The main contributor to the increase during the current fiscal year is higher inflows from the contribution by the National Economic Fund. The following are the major components of the non-tax revenues and expected performance for 2025-2026. Citizen Investment Program. Mr. Speaker, the Citizen by Investment Program is expected to contribute 85 million to direct revenue from the National Economic Fund. The projected direct outturn for this year, 2024-25, from the CIP to revenue is 55 million compared to the approved estimates of 75 million. Mr. Speaker, 79.7 million was received by National Economic Fund. From that amount, 55 million was transferred directly into revenue and the balance for use according to the objectives of the fund. In addition, 11 million was received from bonds to liquidate debts. In the year 2024-25, a further 50 million was used to fund projects in security, healthcare, social development, and infrastructural development. In total, Mr. Speaker, the CIP directly contributed to the economy of St. Lucia 141 million in 2024-2025. The annual audited financial statement and report for the year 2023-2024 has been prepared and will be tabled in the House shortly. Income from property taxes. Revenue collections from commercial properties from this category are expected to increase by 1.6 million to reach 7.9 million for the new fiscal year. Sales of goods and services. Revenue collection from the sale of goods and services are projected to record a sum of 70 million, reflecting an increase of 7.9 million, or 12.8% above the revised estimates for the previous fiscal year. The major revenue lines contributing to the increase are an increase in contribution from National Insurance Corporation for health from 5 million to 7.5 million for health services. Grant receipts. Grant receipts attached to project expenditures are estimated at 93.9 million, reflecting a 23.4 million increase over the projected outturn for 2024-2025. The amount represents 29.0% of the total capital expenditure program for the new fiscal year. Some of the major contributors to the grant inflows are the Taiwanese government, the UK Caribbean Infrastructure Partnership Fund, UK CIF, the European Development Fund, EDF, the Caribbean Development Bank, CDP, and the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. Financing. Mr. Speaker, given the projected level for revenue and grants and the projected expenditure, the estimates of revenue and expenditure are expected to reflect an overall deficit of 201.5 million for the fiscal year 2025-2026. The financing gap estimated for the upcoming year is 335.5 million, which will be accounted for by a combination of foreign and domestic debt financing. Debt financing will be keeping with the government's strategy of securing long-term financing at concessionary terms. 256.7 million from loans, and the remainder 78.2 million from bonds, treasury bills, and notes. The market continues to show great confidence in St. Lucia and does not anticipate any issues with our financial paper on the regional securities market. Some of the external borrowing already identified and sourced include the Republic of China on Taiwan, the Exim Bank, 136 million. International Development Association, the IDA, for 2.8 million. Caribbean Development Bank, say 6.2 million. Government of Saudi Arabia, 27.2 million. African Export and Import Bank, 8.2 million. Caribbean Development Fund, CDF, 3 million. European Investment Bank, 3 million. Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, 2.5 million. Canadian Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Fund, 2.9 million. Mr. Speaker, we project an overall deficit of 201 million, which is within prudential limits, caused mainly by an increase in capital expenditure and an increase in the cost of government operations, main increases in salaries, wages, and the cost of goods and services. The financing gap is due mainly to the financing needed for the payment of debt incurred and now due for payment. However, the primary surplus illustrates the soundness of government's fiscal management and policies. We anticipate continuous improvement, Mr. Speaker, in our fiscal position, and this government continues to skillfully manage the economy of our island. Mr. Speaker, today's presentation of the estimates has been a accumulation of months of consultations and dialogue with public servants, officials of the various ministries, including the fire service, the police, the medicals, fraternity, and correctional officers. These suggestions, recommendations, and input received from members of the public service made me realize and firmer in my conviction of the depth of talent that exists in our civil servants, who are competent and knowledgeable. I want to thank them, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the public servants, the nurses, the doctors, the policemen, the teachers, and all those who contribute to the development of St. Lucia. Special mention to the permanent secretary and staff of the Ministry of Finance, the director and officer of the budget, as they, with little notice, implemented the first stage of the budget reform process, which augurs well for the future of government financial information. Let me thank them, Mr. Speaker. And let me thank again the members of civil society, the staff of the National Printing Corporation, and you, Mr. Speaker, and your staff for their efforts. Mr. Speaker, let me remind members that these estimates are intended to provide just the numbers associated with some of the transformative initiatives my government intends to undertake. In my 2025-2026 policy statement, all the people of St. Lucia, including pensioners, should expect major changes in healthcare, a robust public sector investment program, measures to reduce the impact of imported inflation on the cost of living, exciting housing, education, and social transformation programs, continuous road infrastructure and rehabilitation, innovative tax and non-tax incentives that is incentivize private sector investment and enhance consumer confidence, brand new infrastructure for the police and fire service, further provision of resources for the police to help improve citizen security. Mr. Speaker, I remain optimistic and excited, and with good cause, about the growth of the St. Lucian economy, as well as the healthy fiscal position of the government. Our worst years have been left behind since July 2016. And we are on a new and exciting path for a thriving St. Lucian economy, where all St. Lucians will have an opportunity to improve their quality of life and make St. Lucia one of the best places to live in the world. Mr. Speaker, this is the pledge of my cabinet and I. Mr. Speaker, I end by a quote from Jeremiah. They will fight against you, but they shall not prevail against you. For I am with you, declares the Lord, to deliver to you. I thank you.